The winter morning crept in through the large windows of Rosie's diner, casting long shadows across the checkered floor tiles. Located on the outskirts of a small town where everyone claimed to know each other but few truly did, the diner stood as a haven for early risers, night shift workers heading home, and travelers passing through. The scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon hung in the air, mingling with the soft murmurs of conversation and the occasional clink of silverware against ceramic plates. Ellie Matthews arrived at 6:45 a.m., just as she did every Tuesday and Thursday, her 5-year-old daughter Lily in tow. The little girl clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, her eyes heavy with sleep as she slid into their usual booth near the back. Ellie's uniform, a pale blue scrubs top and matching pants, was freshly washed but carried the telltale signs of countless previous wearings, a faded patch here, a barely perceptible stain there. Her hair was pulled back into a practical ponytail, and the dark circles under her eyes told the story of another night spent catching sleep in fragments between Lily's nightmares and her own worries about the mounting bills on their kitchen counter. "Just a short breakfast, sweetie, and then you're off to Aunt Jenny's while Mommy works her shift," Ellie said, smoothing Lily's unruly curls. The hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant was understaffed and overworked, but at least it provided steady income. Mostly steady, anyway. The recent cut in her hours had been the source of the new worry lines etched around her eyes. "Can I have pancakes with the smiley face?" Lily asked, her voice still husky with sleep. "The one that Beth makes?" Ellie glanced at her watch and then at her wallet, making quick calculations. "Of course, honey, and I'll have my usual coffee and toast." From behind the counter, Beth, a waitress who had worked at Rosie's for longer than anyone could remember, caught Ellie's eye and nodded. No words needed to be exchanged. Their Tuesday ritual was well established. Beth would bring Lily's pancakes with a face made of banana slices and chocolate chips, and Ellie's black coffee with a side of dry toast. The bill would somehow always come out $1 or $2 less than it should, despite Ellie's protests. The diner was half full, the usual crowd of local factory workers grabbing breakfast before their shift, a couple of truckers nursing coffees in companionable silence, and the morning regulars who claimed ownership of their particular stools at the counter. In the far corner booth sat a man nobody recognized, though in a place like Rosie's, that wasn't unusual. Highway 29 brought a steady stream of travelers, most just passing through on their way to somewhere else. The stranger was dressed simply, worn jeans, a basic gray t-shirt under an open black jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He sat quietly, occasionally glancing up from the paperback novel in his hands to take in the diner around him. There was something in his posture that suggested both relaxation and alertness, like a cat lounging in the sun, but with one eye always open. He seemed content to blend into the background, sipping his coffee and turning pages at a leisurely pace. Ellie didn't notice him. Her attention was divided between Lily, who was now coloring on the children's menu with the 3 crayons the diner provided, and the mental checklist she was running through. Drop Lily at Jenny's by 7:30, clock in by 8, remember to ask about picking up an extra weekend shift, check if the electric bill payment went through, find time to call the school about Lily's kindergarten registration. The bell above the diner door jingled, cutting through her thoughts. A group of 4 women entered, all impeccably dressed, despite the early hour. Designer handbags swung from their arms, and the scent of expensive perfume announced their presence before they'd even chosen a table. They settled into the large booth across from Ellie and Lily, their voices carrying across the diner as they discussed their interrupted spa weekend and the inconvenience of having to drive back through this nowhere town because Melissa's Porsche had developed some kind of issue. "I told you we should have taken my car," said a blonde woman, her voice pitched to ensure everyone could hear her displeasure. "German engineering just isn't what it used to be." "Well, Brad said the mechanic here is surprisingly competent," replied another, presumably Melissa, "and it's only for a few hours. We'll be back on the road to the Greenbrier by noon." Ellie tried to tune them out as Beth arrived with their breakfast. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of the pancake face, momentarily forgetting her sleepiness. "Look, Mommy, He's got chocolate chip eyes. He does indeed, Ellie smiled, thanking Beth with a warm glance. Eat up now. We need to head out soon. As Lily dug into her breakfast, the women's conversation grew louder, their laughter more strident. Ellie couldn't help but overhear snippets about vacation homes, private schools, and the absolute nightmare of having to find a new housekeeper who actually understood how to properly clean marble. The man in the corner booth looked up from his book, his eyes briefly meeting Ellie's before she quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught listening. He took another sip of his coffee and returned to his reading, though his posture had subtly shifted, as if he too couldn't help but hear the women's conversation. Lily's elbow bumped her glass of orange juice, sending it wobbling dangerously. Ellie reached out quickly to steady it, but not before a small splash escaped onto the table. Careful, sweetie, she said, using a napkin to mop up the spill. Sorry, Mommy, Lily said, her lower lip trembling slightly. It's okay. Accidents happen, Ellie assured her, continuing to wipe up the juice. No harm done. One of the women at the next table made a loud, exaggerated sigh. This is why I prefer adult-only establishments, she said, not bothering to lower her voice. Some people just can't control their children. Ellie's cheeks burned as she kept her eyes fixed on the table, pretending not to have heard. Lily, thankfully, seemed oblivious, now happily dismantling her pancake face one feature at a time. Now, Caroline, said another woman in the group, though her tone suggested amusement rather than admonishment. Not everyone can afford nannies. This prompted a round of laughter from the table, and Ellie felt her shoulders tense. She'd faced plenty of judgment as a single mother over the years, from family members who thought she should have tried harder with Lily's father, from coworkers who resented her limited availability for last-minute shift changes, from strangers who saw her food stamps and made assumptions about her life choices. Usually, she let it roll off her back, but this morning, with the stress of reduced hours and mounting bills, their casual cruelty cut deeper than it should have. In the corner, the man in the baseball cap closed his book and set it down on the table, his full attention now on the scene unfolding before him. Mommy, can I have more syrup? Lily asked, blissfully unaware of the tension around her. Ellie reached for the syrup dispenser, grateful for the distraction. Just a little more, okay? We don't want to make it too sweet. As she poured a small amount onto what remained of Lily's pancakes, she noticed that her hand was shaking slightly. Taking a deep breath, she set the syrup down and reached for her coffee, needing its warmth and caffeine to center herself. Oh my God, is that what I think it is? The voice from the next table was pitched to Carrie. Are those hospital scrubs? Please tell me she's not going to work at a hospital after letting her kid make a mess everywhere. Ellie's grip tightened around her coffee mug. The logical part of her brain told her to ignore them, to finish breakfast and leave with dignity intact. But another part, the part that had been up since 4 a.m. with a feverish child, the part that had been stretching every dollar and cutting every corner for years, that part wanted to speak up. Before she could decide, Beth appeared at their table, coffee pot in hand. Refill, hon? She asked Ellie, deliberately positioning herself between the two tables. As she topped off Ellie's cup, she spoke in a quiet but firm voice. Don't you mind them. Some folks weren't raised right, that's all. Though she spoke softly, in the morning quiet of the diner, her words carried. One of the women at the adjacent table scoffed. Excuse me? It was the blonde one, Caroline, who had complained about children in restaurants. I don't think it's poor manners to expect a certain level of containment when dining out. Beth turned slowly, coffee pot still in hand. Well, honey, I've been serving folks in this diner for 27 years, and I've found that the ones who make the biggest fuss about other people's manners often have the least themselves. Her smile was pleasant, but her eyes were steel. More coffee? The women declined with tight smiles, their attention now directed to their menus with sudden intense interest. Ellie shot Beth a grateful look, but the moment of peace was short-lived. Some people are so touchy, Caroline Stage whispered to her friends. It's not like we're saying anything that isn't obvious. I mean, look at them. Ellie felt her cheeks burn hotter. Lily, picking up on her mother's discomfort, looked up with concern. Mommy, are you mad? No, sweetheart. Ellie managed, forcing a smile. I'm just thinking about all we have to do today. In the corner booth, the man in the baseball cap signaled to Beth. When she approached, he had a brief, quiet conversation with her, nodding toward Ellie and Lily's table. Beth's expression changed from curiosity to a small smile as she nodded and returned to the counter. Meanwhile, Caroline was still holding court at her table. I'm just saying, if you can't afford to properly care for a child, maybe you shouldn't have one. It's called responsibility. One of her friends giggled nervously. Care, you can't just say things like that. Why not? It's what everyone's thinking. Some people have children when they clearly can't provide for them, and then society is expected to pick up the slack. She glanced over at Ellie, making it clear who she was talking about. I pay enough in taxes without subsidizing other people's poor choices. At that moment, Beth returned to Ellie's table with a fresh plate of pancakes and a side of crispy bacon that Ellie definitely hadn't ordered. I'm sorry, Beth, we didn't, Ellie began. It's taken care of, Beth said with a wink. Compliments of another customer. Ellie looked around in confusion, her eyes eventually landing on the man in the corner booth. He gave a small nod, his expression kind but unreadable beyond that. Ellie felt a complicated mix of gratitude and embarrassment. She wasn't looking for charity, and part of her pride wanted to decline. But Lily's eyes had lit up at the sight of more pancakes, and Ellie couldn't bring herself to turn down something that brought her daughter joy. Thank you, she mouthed to the stranger, who acknowledged her with another slight nod before returning to his book. Caroline, however, had noticed the exchange. Well, isn't that sweet, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Handouts from strangers. That's certainly setting a good example. Ellie had reached her limit. Setting down her coffee cup with deliberate care, she turned to face the other table. Excuse me, she said, her voice quiet but steady. My daughter and I are just trying to have breakfast before I work a 12-hour shift caring for people who are having the worst days of their lives. I don't know what I've done to offend you, but I'd appreciate it if you could keep your comments to yourself. Caroline's eyebrows shot up in exaggerated surprise. Well, I was simply making an observation about parenting in general. If you took it personally, that says more about you than it does about me. No, Ellie replied, surprising herself with her continued composure. You were deliberately speaking loudly enough for me to hear, making assumptions about my life based on a 5-minute observation. That says quite a lot about you, actually. The diner had grown quiet, the other patrons pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Lily looked between her mother and the women with wide, uncertain eyes. Are they being mean, Mommy? She asked in a small voice that somehow carried in the silence. Ellie hesitated, caught between her desire to shield Lily from conflict and her belief in teaching her daughter to recognize unkindness. Before she could answer, the man from the corner booth stood up. He moved with a quiet grace, unhurried yet purposeful, as he approached their tables. Up close, he was taller than he had appeared while seated, with broad shoulders and a presence that somehow filled the space without being imposing. When he removed his baseball cap, he revealed a kind face with thoughtful eyes and the comfortable smile of someone at ease with himself. Hi there, he said, addressing Lily directly. I couldn't help but notice what awesome pancakes you have. Mind if I join you for a minute? Lily looked to her mother for permission. Ellie, still processing this unexpected intervention, gave a small nod. The stranger pulled up a chair at the end of their booth, positioning himself between their table and Caroline's group, who were now watching with undisguised curiosity. I'm Jack, he said, offering his hand first to Lily, who giggled as she shook it, and then to Ellie. I'm Lily, and this is my mom, the little girl volunteered. She works at the hospital and makes people better. Is that right? Jack said, his smile genuine. That sounds like important work. It is, Lily nodded seriously. She has to go even when I have bad dreams sometimes, but that's okay because she helps people who are really sick. Ellie felt a twist in her heart at her daughter's words. The guilt of missing bedtimes, of leaving Lily with her sister Jenny during night shifts, was a constant companion. Well, Jack said, that makes your mom a hero in my book. He turned to Ellie. Nursing? Nursing assistant, Ellie corrected. Working toward my RN, taking classes when I can. Jack nodded appreciatively. That's impressive. Working full-time, raising a daughter, and studying. You must not get much sleep. Ellie gave a small laugh. Sleep is overrated. At the next table, Caroline cleared her throat loudly. Excuse me, but we're trying to have a private conversation here. Jack turned slightly in his chair, regarding Caroline and her friends with a friendly but steady gaze. Of course. Sorry if I'm disturbing you. I just wanted to thank this young lady and her mother for brightening my morning. It's been a while since I've seen such a genuine example of grace under pressure. Caroline's eyes narrowed at what she clearly perceived as a dig, but before she could respond, Jack continued, his tone conversational. You know, I've done a fair bit of traveling, and I've found that you can tell a lot about a place by how people treat each other, especially when they think no one important is watching. His eyes swept over their designer bags and expensive jewelry. In my experience, true class has very little to do with what you own and everything to do with how you treat people. The women shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the implied criticism hanging in the air between them. One of them, not Caroline, had the grace to look embarrassed. We didn't mean any harm, she offered weakly. I'm sure you didn't, Jack replied, his voice kind but firm. Sometimes we forget that our words have power, especially when directed at people who might already be fighting battles we know nothing about. He turned back to Lily. Those pancakes look delicious. Are you enjoying them? And just like that, he diffused the tension, redirecting the conversation to something light and simple. Lily launched into an enthusiastic description of her pancake face, complete with demonstrative gestures that made Jack laugh genuinely. Ellie watched this interaction with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. There was something familiar about this man, not as if she'd met him before, but as if he reminded her of someone. His kindness seemed effortless, his intervention both gentle and effective, without being confrontational. As Jack chatted with Lily about her favorite cartoons and her upcoming kindergarten adventure, Ellie noticed that Caroline and her friends were signaling for their check, their breakfast barely touched. They seemed eager to retreat from the situation, their earlier bravado deflated by Jack's subtle calling out of their behavior. When Beth brought their bill, Caroline paid quickly, leaving what looked like a minimal tip. As they gathered their designer bags and prepared to leave, Jack looked up. Leaving so soon? He asked pleasantly. I hope it wasn't something I said. Our car should be ready by now, Melissa replied stiffly. We have a schedule to keep. Of course, Jack nodded. Safe travels. As the women filed past their table toward the exit, the last one in line, a redhead who had been largely silent during the earlier exchange, paused. She glanced at her friends, already pushing through the door, then turned to Ellie. I'm sorry, she said quietly. That was unkind of us. Your daughter is beautiful. Before Ellie could respond, the woman hurried after her friends, the bell above the door jingling as it closed behind her. The diner settled back into its normal rhythm after the women left. The other patrons returned to their conversations, though Ellie caught several approving glances thrown her way. Beth stopped by to refill coffee cups and clear plates, her expression satisfied as if justice had been served with the morning's pancakes. Jack remained at their table, now engaged in an elaborate thumb-wrestling tournament with Lily that had her dissolving into giggles each time he let her win. Ellie checked her watch and realized with a start that they needed to leave soon. Lily, honey, we need to get going or you'll be late to Aunt Jenny's, and I'll be late for work. Lily's face fell. But I'm playing with Jack. And you're a worthy opponent, Jack said solemnly. But your mom's right. Important people have important places to be. Ellie began gathering their things, digging in her purse for her wallet. Thank you for the extra pancakes, she said to Jack, and for stepping in. You didn't have to do that. Jack waved away her thanks. Sometimes people forget that their words have consequences. A gentle reminder never hurts. He paused, watching her count out dollars for the tip. Please, let me get the bill. It would be my pleasure. Ellie's pride flared up instinctively. That's very kind, but we're fine. I can manage. Jack nodded, respecting her decision without argument. Of course, but at least let me walk you to your car. It's the least I can do after Lily let me win at thumb wrestling 3 times in a row. You didn't let me win, Lily protested. I'm just super strong. My mistake, Jack laughed, holding up his hands in surrender. Ellie smiled despite herself. There was something disarming about this stranger, a genuineness that broke through her usual caution. All right, she agreed. We're just parked out back. After leaving money for the bill and thanking Beth, they made their way through the diner and out the side door to the small parking lot. Ellie's car, a 15-year-old Honda with fading paint and a dent in the passenger door, was parked in the corner under a large oak tree. "This is us," she said, fishing her keys from her purse. "Nice spot," Jack commented, looking up at the oak tree. "Good shade," Ellie laughed. "It's less about the shade and more about hiding the car's condition from the elements. It's not much, but it gets us where we need to go." "The best kind of car," Jack nodded approvingly. "Reliable." As Ellie helped Lily into her booster seat in the back, she felt compelled to offer some further explanation, though she wasn't sure why she cared what this stranger thought. "Listen, about what those women said. I know it probably looks like I'm struggling, but Lily doesn't go without anything important. We have a nice little apartment. She has plenty of books and toys, and she's loved. I'm just in a temporary tight spot with hours being cut at the hospital." Jack leaned against the car, his expression thoughtful. "You know, it's interesting how we've created a society where a person working full-time, caring for the sick, raising a child, and pursuing education feels the need to defend their worth to strangers." The simple truth of his observation hit Ellie with unexpected force. She'd spent so long internalizing the judgment, from her ex, from society, from herself, that she'd stopped questioning its validity. "I guess I've gotten used to feeling like I need to explain myself," she admitted, closing Lily's door and turning to face him. "You don't," Jack said simply. "Not to me, not to those women in there, not to anyone. You're doing something incredibly valuable and difficult. That stands on its own." Ellie felt a lump form in her throat at his words. It had been a long time since anyone had validated her choices instead of questioning them. "Thank you," she managed, "for saying that, and for what you did in there. It's not often someone stands up for the single mom in scrubs." "Maybe more people should," Jack replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to her. "I know you said you're working toward your RN. I have some connections at Pacific Memorial Hospital in the city. They have an excellent program for nursing assistants continuing their education, tuition assistance, flexible scheduling. If you're interested, give me a call and I can make an introduction." Ellie took the card hesitantly, reading the simple text. "Jackson Stone, Stone Entertainment Group," followed by a phone number and email address. "You work in entertainment?" she asked, confused. Jack smiled. "Among other things. My company has a foundation that partners with several hospitals on healthcare education initiatives. It's more my sister's project than mine. She's the one with the medical background, but I know the right people to connect you with." "I don't know what to say," Ellie said, staring at the card. Opportunities like this didn't just fall into her lap on random Tuesday mornings. "This is incredibly generous." "It's just an introduction," Jack said with a shrug. "You've done the hard part already, putting in the work, caring for patients, raising an amazing kid. Sometimes the universe just needs to handle the introductions." From inside the car, Lily tapped on the window. "Mommy, we're going to be late." Ellie checked her watch again and grimaced. "She's right, we really do need to go." She pocketed the card and held out her hand. "Thank you again, Jack, for everything." Jack shook her hand. "It was my pleasure, Ellie. And Lily," he called through the window, "keep practicing that thumb wrestling. You almost had me last time." Lily beamed and gave him a thumbs up. As Ellie got into the driver's seat and started the car, she glanced in her rearview mirror to wave goodbye. Jack stood in the parking lot, raising his hand in farewell, the morning sun casting his tall figure in silhouette. For a brief moment, with his tall frame and the way he stood, something clicked in Ellie's mind, a sense of recognition, as if she'd seen him somewhere before. But then, the moment passed, and she pulled out of the parking lot, already mentally shifting gears to the day ahead. Ellie's shift at the hospital passed in its usual blur of activity, checking vitals, assisting nurses, helping patients to the bathroom, changing bedding, and offering what comfort she could in the brief moments between tasks. By the time her lunch break arrived at 1:30 p.m., she was more than ready for the sandwich she'd hastily packed that morning. In the staff break room, she sank into a chair at the small table in the corner, stretching her tired legs out in front of her. As she unwrapped her sandwich, her coworker Miguel dropped into the chair across from her, his expression animated. "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "Seen what?" Ellie replied, stifling a yawn. Miguel slid his phone across the table. "It's all over social media. Happened this morning at Rosie's diner. Someone recorded the whole thing." Ellie's sandwich froze halfway to her mouth. Recorded what at Rosie's? Some rich ladies were being total jerks to a single mom and her kid, and then this guy stepped in and basically shut them down in the nicest way possible. People are going crazy over it because it turns out the guy was... But Ellie wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at the phone, at the video playing on its screen. The footage was a little shaky, clearly taken surreptitiously from a few tables away, but the audio was clear enough. She watched in disbelief as the scene from that morning played out. Caroline's loud comments, her own response, and then Jack's intervention. The video had been started midway through the confrontation, and the angle didn't capture Jack's face clearly, just the back of his head as he sat with them. One of the most famous actors in Hollywood. Miguel was saying, his excitement palpable. "Can you believe it? Right here in our town. Apparently he's shooting some indie film a few counties over and just stopped in for breakfast. The person who posted it says he was super low-key, reading a book by himself until those women started being nasty." Ellie's mind was racing, trying to process what Miguel was telling her. Who was it? Miguel looked at her like she'd asked what color the sky was. "Jack Reardon, you know, from the Midnight Chronicles series, and those action movies with the car chases. He's like one of the biggest stars out there, but he's known for being super private and down to earth. There are all these stories about him doing anonymous good deeds." Jack Reardon. The name hit Ellie like a physical force, of course. The kind eyes, the gentle confidence, the way he carried himself. It all made sense now. She'd watched those movies, had even had a bit of a crush on the actor, like half the women in America. But in person, without the Hollywood context, in that baseball cap and simple clothes, she hadn't made the connection. "The best part," Miguel continued, oblivious to Ellie's shock, "is what happens at the end of the video. Watch." Ellie's eyes returned to the phone screen. The video showed Jack getting up from their table, preparing to leave. As he stood, his baseball cap was momentarily pushed back, and the camera caught his full face for just a second, enough time for a clear view of Jack Reardon's unmistakable features. In the background of the video, someone could be heard gasping, "Oh my God, that's Jack Reardon!" The video then cut to the women who had been so rude, their faces comically frozen in shock as they realized who had called them out. The final shot showed Jack walking calmly out of the diner, stopping to leave what appeared to be a very generous tip at the counter, completely unaffected by the stir he'd created. "The internet is having a field day with those women's faces," Miguel laughed. "Total karma. But the real story everyone's talking about is how he just quietly stood up for this mom and kid without making a big deal about who he was." He peered at Ellie more closely. "Hey, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ellie set down her sandwich, her appetite gone. "I was there," she said quietly. "What?" Miguel leaned forward, not sure he'd heard correctly. "I was there," Ellie repeated, louder this time. "That's me and Lily in the video. That's us he was helping." Miguel's jaw dropped. "No way, no way!" His voice rose enough that several other staff members looked over curiously. "You met Jack Reardon and didn't recognize him?" "He was just a nice guy in a baseball cap." Ellie defended herself, her cheeks burning. "He introduced himself as Jack, just Jack. I thought he worked in entertainment business stuff, not that he was him." "What was he like?" Miguel asked, still wide-eyed with disbelief. Ellie thought about it, remembering Jack Reardon's kindness to Lily, his gentle but firm handling of Caroline, the way he'd offered help without making her feel like a charity case. "He was kind," she said finally. "Just genuinely kind. Nothing like you'd expect a huge star to be." "Did you get his autograph? A selfie?" Miguel pressed. "No, of course not. I didn't know who he was," Ellie reminded him. Then she remembered the business card. But he did give me his card, said something about his foundation helping with nursing education. She dug in her pocket and pulled out the simple white card. There it was. Jackson Stone, Stone Entertainment Group. A pseudonym, obviously, but the phone number and email were presumably real. Miguel was practically bouncing in his seat. Ellie, do you realize what this means? Jack Reardon, the Jack Reardon, gave you his personal contact info. That's just not something that happens. Ellie stared at the card, trying to reconcile the kind stranger from the diner with the Hollywood superstar everyone was talking about. It seemed impossible that they were the same person, and yet the video evidence was right in front of her. I should throw this away, she said suddenly. What? Are you insane? Miguel looked horrified. Why would you do that? Because he was just being nice, Ellie explained, feeling protective of the genuine interaction they'd shared. He probably didn't expect me to find out who he really was. I'm sure the last thing he wants is some random single mom from a diner calling him. Miguel shook his head vehemently. No way. If Jack Reardon gives you his card and offers to help, you take him up on it. The guy is famous for actually meaning what he says. There are all these stories about him anonymously paying for people's college tuitions and medical bills. Those are just stories, Ellie protested weakly, though she was starting to doubt her own resistance. What if the offer had been genuine? What if this really was the universe offering her a hand up when she needed it most? Look, Miguel said, his tone turning serious. I get being cautious, but think about Lily. If this could help you finish your RN faster, get better hours, make more money, don't you owe it to both of you to at least try? Ellie's lunch break ended before she could decide what to do, but Miguel's words stayed with her throughout her afternoon shift. By the time she picked Lily up from Jenny's house at 9 p.m., she was no closer to a decision. Mommy, Lily exclaimed when Ellie arrived, running to hug her legs. Guess what? I'm famous! Ellie looked questioningly at her sister, who was leaning against the door frame with a knowing smirk. Someone from Lily's daycare saw the video and recognized her, Jenny explained. By the time I picked her up, all the teachers were talking about it. Our little celebrity here has been telling everyone about her friend Jack all afternoon. Ellie groaned. Has it really spread that fast? Are you kidding? Local single mom defended by major Hollywood star? It's catnip for social media. Jenny beckoned her inside. Come on, Lily's had dinner, but I saved a plate for you. You can tell me all about your brush with fame while you eat. Later, after putting an exhausted Lily to bed in Jenny's spare room, it was too late to go home now. Ellie sat at her sister's kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea and turning the business card over and over in her hands. I think you should call, Jenny said, watching her from across the table. What's the worst that could happen? I don't know, Ellie sighed. It feels wrong somehow, like I'd be taking advantage of his kindness. Or, Jenny countered, you'd be accepting help that was genuinely offered. Ellie, you've been killing yourself working and studying for 3 years. You never accept help from anyone, not from me, not from friends, no one. Maybe it's time to let someone make things a little easier, even if that someone happens to be a famous actor. Ellie looked down at the card again, remembering Jack's words in the parking lot. Sometimes the universe just needs to handle the introductions. Had this been the universe's strange way of introducing her to an opportunity she'd be foolish to refuse? I'll think about it, she promised, tucking the card back into her pocket. Just don't overthink it, Jenny advised. That's your specialty, you know. That night, lying on Jenny's couch, Ellie found herself unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jack's kind smile, heard his voice defending her to Caroline and her friends. She replayed their conversation, looking for signs she'd missed, hints of his true identity. But there had been none, just a genuinely kind person who'd stepped in when he saw someone being mistreated. Her phone lit up with a text from Miguel. Have you called yet? She typed back, no, still thinking. His response came immediately. Whatever you decide, you just lived through the plot of like 50 different romance novels, just saying. Ellie laughed quietly in the darkness, but the comment made her pause. Was that what people were assuming, that this was some kind of romantic,